Cuba sits just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, close enough that on a clear day, it almost doesn't feel like a different world. But right now, it might as well be collapsing in real time. The lights are going out. Entire cities are spending most of the day in darkness. Fuel is disappearing, food is spoiling. And behind all of it, something much bigger is unfolding, because this isn't just about Cuba anymore. This is about proximity, power, and attention that has been building quietly for more than half a century. And now, for the first time in decades, it feels like something could actually happen. Section 121 Fund Why Cuba Matters Now. For over 60 years, Cuba has been a constant in American foreign policy. Always there, always close, always complicated, but rarely urgent. That's changed. Recently, a sweeping economic blockade was put into place, cutting off critical supplies, especially oil. Officially, the reasoning centers on national security because Cuba isn't just struggling economically, it's hosting something far more sensitive: foreign intelligence operations. Not rumors, not speculation, real infrastructure. Facilities capable of monitoring communications across the southeastern United States, military signals, naval movements, strategic transmissions. From Washington's perspective, that's not a distant concern. That's happening right at the doorstep. Section 25. The pressure builds once the blockade begins. The effects are immediate. Cuba depends heavily on imported fuel. Without it, the system doesn't just slow down, it breaks. Power plants shut off, the electrical grid becomes unstable, and then entire regions go dark. Not for hours, for most of the day. Hospitals struggle to operate. Water systems fail, food storage collapses. The kind of infrastructure people rely on quietly starts disappearing. And when basic systems fail, everything else follows. Section 3 Thine. The money behind the politics, but national security isn't the only factor at play. There's something else driving this situation forward. Money for decades. American companies have held unresolved claims tied to Cuba assets lost after the revolution. Properties taken, investments erased, billions of dollars sitting in legal limbo. If Cuba's system changes, if control shifts, those doors reopen. And what follows could be one of the largest economic transitions in the region's history. Opportunities like that don't stay ignored. They build pressure quietly, but consistently. Section 45 Timing is everything. Even with all of this tension, timing matters, because global strategy is never isolated. Decisions here are connected to events happening elsewhere, especially in regions where US attention is already focused, which means any major move toward Cuba doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when the conditions are right. When attention is divided, when the moment feels manageable. Section 5 to insert, the door that's already open. There's something most people overlook. The United States doesn't need to enter Cuba, not entirely, because it's already there. At the southeastern edge of the island sits a long-established naval base, strategically positioned. Fully operational, equipped with an airfield capable of handling massive transport aircraft, and recently its presence has quietly expanded. Additional forces, more infrastructure, more capability, no headlines, no announcements, but the kind of positioning that matters if anything changes. Section 6923 Paths Forward. So what happens next? Based on current conditions, there are 3 realistic directions this could take. Scenario 1. The quiet deal. This is the least visible, but potentially the cleanest. Instead of conflict, it begins with conversations, back-channel discussions, connections inside the system. Individuals with influence. The goal is simple: transition from within, a shift in leadership that doesn't look like collapse, but functions like one. If successful, power changes hands without open conflict, a new structure emerges, and the country opens itself economically almost overnight. To the outside world, it looks like diplomacy. Behind the scenes, it's something far more calculated. Scenario 2, collapse from within. This is the most likely path. And it doesn't start with troops. It starts with pressure. The blockade tightens, resources run out. Daily life becomes harder, then harder still, until eventually the system begins to fracture, not all at once, But piece by piece, local authorities stop responding, control weakens, and eventually there's no clear structure left holding everything together. At that point, outside involvement doesn't look like an invasion. It looks like intervention, stability control, and it happens fast. Strategic locations are secured. Key infrastructure is stabilized, and within days, the balance of power shifts completely. Scenario 3. Direct military action. This is the most aggressive option and the most visible. It begins before anyone even sees it, through systems, through networks, through vulnerabilities already in place. Critical infrastructure is targeted digitally. Power grids fail, communications collapse, coordination disappears, and suddenly an entire country is disconnected before a single physical move is made. Then, the physical phase begins. Forces already positioned move inland. Additional units arrive through the air. Key cities are isolated, command structures are cut off, and within a very short window control is established, at least on paper, because what follows is never that simple. Section 7 Thun. The real problem. History has shown something important. Winning the initial phase of a conflict is one thing. What comes after is something else entirely. Because even if organized resistance ends quickly, that doesn't mean stability follows. In fact, it often doesn't. Local populations adapt. Resistance changes form. Instead of conventional battles, it becomes something harder to track, harder to control, and much harder to end. Section 8 FIA. The global reaction. This doesn't happen in isolation. Other countries are watching closely. Some have already invested heavily in Cuba's infrastructure, especially in energy, renewable systems, power generation, long-term projects designed to stabilize the island's future. If conflict damages those investments, it doesn't just affect Cuba. It affects global relationships. Tensions rise, not necessarily through direct confrontation, but through economic pressure, diplomatic pushback, strategic positioning, the kind that reshapes alliances over time. Section 920. The bigger consequences. And then there's geography. Cuba isn't across the world. It's right next door, which means any prolonged instability doesn't stay contained. It moves, migration increases, political pressure builds, public opinion shifts, and suddenly what started as a foreign policy decision becomes a domestic issue. So yes, from a purely military perspective, this is straightforward, quick, decisive, but real outcomes are never decided that easily, because wars aren't just about entering, they're about staying, they're about rebuilding, they're about what happens when the structure is gone and something new has to take its place. Right now, Cuba is already under pressure, already changing, already unstable. The question isn't whether something will happen. It's how far things go before someone decides to step in, because sometimes the most powerful move isn't pulling the trigger, it's waiting until you don't have to.